Hi, I'm Lance Lambert. Thanks for tuning in to the Vintage Vehicle Show. We are in San Diego, California at the San Diego Collection. This is a collection of great cars, real cross-section. We have some foreign, some U.S., some great cars here. You're going to get a chance to see these cars, and you are about to meet a gentleman that invited us here today. Chuck Swimmer, come on out here, Chuck.
Thank you, Lance.
How are you doing? Good.
How are you? Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us here today.
Our pleasure having you.
Wonderful facility. How did this all come about?
Well, this is a product of Chuck Swimmer bought too many cars, and he keeps a certain amount at home and a certain amount at various museums, and then there was an overflow. So I bought the building with the idea of housing my overflow of cars, and then since then we've added in some very pristine cars that I have found throughout the country and throughout the world. I've been fortunate to put together a wonderful staff here, so this has become more than a place to park cars. It's a place for people that are out of town and, of course, San Diego people to enjoy. And we host car clubs here, the Ferrari Club, the Jaguar Club, the Rolls-Royce Club, and various others. And we have fundraisers for, like, the California Highway Patrol, different events, and it's just a fun place. It's a hobby that's really expanded.
And you mentioned your staff. You have a great staff. They have a barber on staff here.
Well, a barber by accident. This lovely lady was my barber for a number of years, and when I would go sit in her chair and have my hair cut, which is occasionally, she would have a picture of my cars on the wall. She would have a picture of me up there. And I have a very happy marriage, so it was basically a car relationship. And I asked her if she could possibly consider leaving the barbershop and joining us as our hostess, because she's a very charming, pretty lady, and she's been here 4+ years.
And she not only has lunch waiting for us, but I got a haircut about a half hour ago thanks to her, so something very unusual. Your collection is not unusual, but it's a little bit eclectic and just gorgeous. Can we take a look at some of the cars?
Sure, I'd be very happy to show them to you.
Chuck, you have cars here that I suspect are 7-figure automobiles, but at the other end of the spectrum, you have a 1931 Ford Model A. You know, pretty humble, pretty simple car compared to some of the other ones you have in the collection. Tell us about this car.
Well, you know, I like pre-war cars a lot, although you're going to see mostly post-war cars. The pre-war cars, for the most part, are at my house or in museums and different places. But I happen to love Model A's. They're simple, wonderful, dependable cars, and I've had maybe 7 or 8 of them. And I have a hard time passing by these cars. I don't rate a car because it's expensive, that it's desirable. If it sort of feels good and it works. Like, this is a absolute wonderful little original car. It's a 31, which I think was the best year of the Model A's. It's a sport coupe. It runs perfectly.
When you step out of a 31 Model A and you step into one of your high-end Ferraris that you have here, what's that feel like? It's so many worlds apart. What's the sensation that you get?
Well, I think as you go through our selection of cars, you're going to see this is a very eclectic collection. We will go from Bugattis, concept cars, some of the world's best Rolls-Royce and Bentleys, to Italian cars, to Model A's, to some 50s cars. I'm not a particular high-performance car person. I think that's something all into itself, but we do have some examples of rather potent cars. And some of these cars David has selected. David's a little bit on the younger side, so I allow him the liberty. If he sees something that he loves and it makes some kind of sense, then we'll buy that car as well.
Come on in here, David.
Hi, Lance. How you doing? Welcome
Good.
to San Diego.
Thank you. So, Chuck, we're a couple of old-timers who have had a lot of years behind us to accumulate a lot of knowledge about these cars, but this guy, he's a young guy. How did this guy come into the fold?
You know, something interesting. When I put this facility together, which was about 5 years ago, and discovered all of a sudden it was more than I could handle with other businesses that I'm running and involved in, I hired David as a car wash detail person, which he was the best car wash detail person and very bright. David knows his cars, loves his cars. He's a student of them and is a great asset to this place. And he is fully in charge. He's the general manager and a part owner in a growing fashion. But David will eventually take over this place.
Sounds to me like you fell into earned your way into a really good gig here, being the general manager. So you applied for a job to detail cars, and you woke up one day and you're running the joint. How'd that feel?
Oh, it felt great. Of course, that's the American dream. You kind of start out with a company at entry level and you work your way up as best you can. And I'm very fortunate to be in the position I'm in today.
Well, Chuck, we'll let David take over here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming in.
If I do a good job of detailing one of your cars, do you think there's any chance I can bump David out of his job?
I don't know if you
take
can
his
bump
position?
him out, but he could probably use a helper.
Yeah, I can always use the extra hand.
David, I have a real soft spot for Mustangs. I had an 88 Celine and traded that in on an 06 convertible. I think the two of those together, plus another big bundle of money, might get me this Mustang. Tell us about this. This is gorgeous.
That'd be a good place to start, a good down deposit.
Okay.
But, yeah, you know, much like yourself, there's a soft spot in everybody's heart for a Mustang. With the muscle car market kind of the way it is, you know, people have either owned one before in the past, or it's got to have the right motor, it's got to be the right color. It's kind of a niche market. With Mustangs, everybody wants a Mustang. It's just one of those American icon cars, the pony car that kind of started it all. These are both K codes, which is the high horsepower. This is the 289, 271 horsepower engine with the solid lifters. That's actually what Carroll Shelby based his Cobras off of. They all started with that 289, 271 horsepower. Shelby did his thing to them, increased them up to about 306 horsepower, and of course raced the car on Sundays.
Fastback Mustangs are gorgeous. 65 fastback Mustangs are maybe the most gorgeous fastback. Beautiful example here. A little bit of a change on the hood, I noticed, but tell us about this car.
Well, like I said, this is a 10,000 original mile car. Like I said, a little change to the hood with the Shelby style hood with the scoop and the Shelby style wheel. A lot of times people race these K codes because they kind of came out of the factory with the high horsepower and the 4-speed and the disc brakes. So I'm assuming that's what the previous owner did with this vehicle, but I've got complete documentation stating 10,000 original miles on the car. I've been in the business for probably about 10 years, and I've never even seen a K code with 10,000 original miles ever advertised. And that's just a really, really special car, really clean body. You know, it's really hard to get these cars to line back upright when they take them apart and restore them. So to actually have an original example and see how Henry Ford did it himself, this is a great example of that, Mark.
Mustang quality on the build, they were basically you know, a jazzed up Falcon when they started, and economy was I think when these were brand new, they were what, the 64 and a half, about $2,800,
yeah,
something like that.
Between 23 and 2,800.
Yeah. And so they were trying to get the market that wanted something a little bit special but didn't have to spend a whole lot of money for it. So you don't have the build quality of, say, a Cadillac build at the same time. But now they are worth so much money, yet there are so many of them. What is that magic?
You know, they're really easy to maintain. You know, much like a lot of these older cars, you know, it's an engine, motor, transmission, lights, and that's all you really need. The Mustang, you can really upgrade it from its original package, just with bigger carburetors. I mean, even coming from the factory, the only change from the A code to the C code was a bigger carburetor, which gave you 20 more horsepower. So, you know, little stuff like that kind of increases the car from your daily driver into something you could take out on the track and enjoy. So that's part of the reason people like Mustangs. And then just being a nice lightweight car, you know, it's just a great piece. Yeah.
In 1957, my dad brought home a 1956 Cadillac, which was pretty exciting around the Lambert household, but it didn't look as good as this one. This looks different than the one we had. Tell us about this one.
Just a little different. A couple changes. This is actually a 56 Eldorado Seville, and it's a prototype. This car, some of the unique features are these quad headlights here, which
very
were
58 Chev looking.
Yeah, they weren't available in the United States till 1958. The Dagmar bumpers, which didn't come out till 1957. Towards the rear of the vehicle, there's some really unique trim pieces that weren't available at the time. We've actually uncovered 3 of these vehicles in the course of owning this car. There's one convertible in Peru, which has since been lost. Nobody knows where it's at. It's no longer in existence. This car, and then the 56 Eldorado Barome town car, which just sold at RM auction for $735,000 just last year. So with those 3 cars, we believe that's the sister ring of those 3 with the quad headlights from 56, and just a very, very special car. This car's only got 52,000 original miles. It was repainted one time, the original color, and this is just the way she sits. It runs and drives just absolutely beautiful, and it's one of the rarest and most unique Cadillacs we've had the opportunity to own. This is a kind of part of the show where we get to you know, what I like in the collection. I like the Italian sports cars, some of the more modern cars. Of course, I've got a great passion for the older stuff, but it's stuff like this that kind of really tickles me. And I've wanted a car like this my entire life, and really fortunate to actually own it. This is a 95 512M of the Testarossa series. Testarossa is pretty much 1985 and so on. Up to about 91, they started with the 512 TRs, and this was the final year, was the 512M. It's the larger engine, a little bit more horsepower, kind of hovering somewhere around 450 with about a 200-mile top speed. And in 1995, this car was $195,000. So very expensive for a Ferrari in 1995, but definitely one of the best ones in the mark.
You've driven every car in here, and cars elicit different reactions from the general public. You can be driving down the street in your Mustang, and I think everybody just sees that as a warm and fuzzy, thumbs up kind of car, a cool warm and fuzzy. But what kind of reaction do you get driving down the street in a Testarossa?
Well, first off, everybody wants to race you, you know, so you got to be not heavy on the pedal, because these cars will go really fast. But no, they all appreciate the vehicles. A lot of times people really don't know what they are. Some of these, like this car, there's only 75 of them in the United States, so 9 times out of 10, most people have never even seen this car. But you definitely get a warm, fuzzy, thumbs up feeling from a lot of the people. But yeah. Everybody's younger wants to race you.
You have 3 Bentleys here and a Rolls. The old cliche is the rich Englishman drives the Rolls and his manservant drives the Bentley. Is that the case? Although it seems like Bentleys have, the hobby has really taken interest in Bentley in the last 10 years or so. Yeah,
definitely. The Bentley market has definitely gone up in the past 5 to 10 years or so. You know, Rolls Royces are a little bit more expensive to kind of maintain. Bentleys are a little bit more available, but the styling on the Rolls is kind of what captures everybody. You just don't get that styling on Bentleys. This was rebodied in the mid-60s. We just did a complete restoration on this car. Changed just a couple little things, adding the louvers, the stripes, a couple of the scoops here and there. But we just drove this car 1,000 miles on the Colorado Grand just about 3 weeks ago. Performed exceptionally well. The car drove 100 plus miles an hour, and if we could do it again tomorrow, I think we would.
The value of old cars, especially this type of old car, the more provenance the car has, the more valuable it becomes. You just had this in the Colorado Grand. Every little bit you can add to the history of these cars adds a little bit of value to them.
Yeah, with Pebble Beach quality cars, what you're buying there is quality. You're buying the car that's absolutely perfect, that has no issues with it, and that's really where all the value is on those cars. The cars that have race history, events like the Colorado Grand is more of an exposition for us, just kind of enjoy the cars, show off the cars, drive the cars how they should be. But it's events like Goodwood, you know, in the 50s and the 60s. It's events like Le Mans. It's you know, a lot of the European races. Now that's what adds value to the car, and also depends on who the driver was. You know, if the car was at a race in 1954 and nobody knows who the driver was, you know, that car's not really worth too much money. But if you got a car that was driven by Sterling Moss, well, that one's worth a little bit of money.
You said this is one of one. What do we have one of here?
One of one. Well, like I said, we like rare, unique, and interesting vehicles. And like I said, one of one. This is a Pininfarina bodied Mark VI Bentley. Pininfarina, of course, designed the Ferraris that everybody's known, that is what he's really known for. But what people really don't know is he did 3 Bentleys. He did 2 coupes, and he was so impressed with the coupes that his wife asked him to do 1 convertible for her. And this is that vehicle. This is the one Bentley that he built for his wife, the only convertible he ever designed. It's an alloy body. It's the Mark VI with the bigger engine, so it's a performance car as well as luxury, and it's just a great example. We showed this at Pebble Beach 2 years ago.
What year is this?
This is a 1949.
49. The look of a Rolls-Royce and a Bentley, the quality was unquestionable. Everybody knew that. The look of them, the design, they were classic elegance, but they always seemed to be, not with the exception of some of their fastbacks, but they seemed to lag a little bit behind in design to my eye. They look like, you know, the 35s look like they were designed in 33. And do you think that was just because it was appealing to a more conservative crowd, or am I do I know what I'm talking about?
No, I think that was definitely it. It was definitely a more conservative crowd that bought these cars, that ordered these cars, and a lot of times with these older vehicles, Bentley, Rolls-Royces, some of the other high-end European cars, when you bought them, you bought a chassis and an engine, and then you took it to another company to be bodied. So really, it's the owner's personal take of the vehicle, what he wanted to see happen with it, what he really wanted to do, and that's what the kind of the body that's put on the car. That's why they're custom-built, coach-built cars.
How did this come into your collection? This obviously is one Pebble Beach. It's one of one. We could probably sell this and buy the rest of the collection.
Yeah, you know, this is probably one of the best blindsided purchases we've ever bought. Chuck and I were sitting here Saturday afternoon one day, going through a catalog, and noticed that this car was coming up for auction that day. We called the auction house and we asked them how far back the car was. It was about maybe 2-3 hours away. We told them to call us back when the car was on the block. They called us back on the block. We bought the car and had it shipped to California.
So you're one of those phone bidders we see.
We are one of the phone bidders. There really are phone bidders out there. It's not just people talking on the phone, so yes.
John Taylor from Tacoma, Washington. If you are out there, take a close look at this car. John was a guy in my high school back when the coolest thing you could own was a 55 or 56 Chev, and John started showing up in, this is a 54 120?
Yep.
Jaguar. He was the first guy around with one of these cars, and people were said they didn't get it. You know, it's like it sort of drew them in, but why would you drive something like this instead of a 55 Chev? Well, now you sell this and buy 4 55 Chevs probably.
Exactly.
The styling on these, it seemed like, I'm putting words in your mouth here, but it seems like they were really popular and then they weren't, and then they really came on strong. How does that happen?
You know, of course, with all these cars, it's all about the way it appeals to you. You know, a lot of people grew up with these back then at that time, and they really couldn't afford them. So that's maybe why they didn't like them, because they couldn't afford them. They thought it was for the wealthier crowd, the yuppie crowd, you know, whatever the case may be. And here they are, you know, 40, 50 years later, and they could actually afford the car. So now they're starting to purchase them. Right now, the European sports car market and the Ferrari market are really the two key markets that we're trying to capture, because that's what's really selling right now. I've got 3 Jaguars here, and this is probably the most valuable one and the most desirable one are these 120s.
Mm-hmm. History on this? Do you know?
Really don't know the history too much on this car. The car actually came out of Chicago, Illinois. We just bought it. It's one of the newest acquisitions to the collection, but they're fantastic vehicles. We've owned probably about 5 or 10 in the past. We actually currently own a 49 alloy car, which we took on the Colorado Grand a couple years ago. But they're fantastic automobiles. It's a 3.8 liter inline six, and the car just absolutely drives fantastic.
So probably owned by some swinging playboy guy in the 50s, as opposed to the bank president.
Very well could be. Very well could be. So I hope somebody famous owned it. That way it'll be a valuable car.
Yeah, you'll go up. Well, let's take a look at what you have next door here.
Okay.
If I had to make a list of the 5 most beautiful cars ever designed, somewhere on that list would be an E-Type Jaguar. Absolutely gorgeous. You have a 64 here?
Yeah, I've got a 64 coupe here. It's really just an absolutely phenomenal restoration. Pretty much one of the best ones we've bought in the past 5 to 6 years. This car is actually brought to us by a local dentist here in town. I don't know if you've ever bought a car off of a dentist, but they're the people who I like to buy cars off of because they're just absolute fanatics about their vehicles. This car is $110,000 invested into it. Today it's probably valued somewhere around $80,000, $85,000, but just absolutely perfect and only 3 miles since it was completely done.
Jaguars, the styling on just about everyone ever designed is gorgeous. But they have a reputation, you know, Lucas, the Prince of Darkness, the electrical system on them, the reliability of them is sometimes brought into question. What's your feeling on that and your experience as far as the reliability of the Jaguars that you've had in your collection?
Well, with the Jaguars, when they're good, but when they're bad, they're really bad. And that's what we've learned over the years. One day, it's the best driving car you've ever had. The next day, something goes wrong and you're kicking the tires. You love your Jaguar, you hate your Jaguar. You love your Jaguar, you hate your Jaguar. And that's really just known in the Jaguar industry, and people just kind of accept it. It's really one of the best experiences you can kind of have with the classic cars, because Jaguar, of course, it is luxury, but at the same time it's also a sports car. You do get to dabble a little bit with the engine work and maintenance here and there, so you kind of get to feel for that. It's not a car that's just going to go completely its entire life without having to do any work to. So you also get the experience working on your car as well as driving it, enjoying it, being a luxury car and a sports car. So Jaguars kind of have everything put into them, and it really appeals to a lot of people. As for the styling on the cars, these are the best aerodynamically designed cars that were ever produced. There's only 7 points on these E-Types Jags that collect drag. So
a 1959 Fiat Abarth, and I love the nicknames for these, the double bubble, because of the 2 ridges on the top. This thing is tiny, and it looks like you could put it in the trunk of one of the Bentleys or Rolls we looked at earlier. Tell me, I don't know much about Abarth's double bubbles. Tell me about it.
Well, actually, I'm still kind of learning myself. Actually, we just bought this car just recently, and it's a really special little car. They were around for a couple of years. A collaboration between Carlos Abarth and then Zagato, of course, who is really famous for building the coachwork on a lot of really unique vehicles. But both of them put together kind of came up with this design here. It's a really an unbustable little car. They're really used for racing, a lot of rallies. It's got an 803cc engine, and they just run and drive just absolutely amazingly. They hit corners faster than anything I've ever driven in my life. We actually had this up at Pebble Beach about 2 or 3 months ago, just as something to drive around the island, drive around 17-mile drive, go to some of the different events, and we just had an absolute ball. We had 2 relatively large gentlemen like myself driving around Pebble Beach in this little car. It was a lot of fun, and it performed exceptionally well.
Was this a purpose-built vehicle back then? It was built for racing, or it was just something they came up with and threw it in the market to see what would happen?
Yeah, they built it, threw it on the market, see what would happen, and when people started taking them on the tracks, it just performed so well that they decided to continue the mark and produce many more of them. And now that's really what people use these for rally racing.
I don't think I've ever seen one in the flesh. I've seen them in magazines, read about them. It's the first one I've ever seen. How rare are they?
Well, I've only seen 1 or 2. We actually got the stripe pattern from one of the other vehicles that we saw. You know, I really don't know how many are left in existence. I think this year they did 1,150 of them that year. But yeah, they're really neat cars. They're very hard to find. And yeah, you just don't see them too often. Just don't see them too often. It's an alloy body, so it's very light, and the car just runs like heck.
Power plant on it? What's the performance?
probably 0 to 60, it's somewhere around 7 seconds. Quarter mile is probably 18, 19, but it's the tight turns and getting around the track that really kind of is what this car is really known for.
Mm-hmm. And how big is the power plant?
803 cc.
Huh.
Yeah.
So, you know, like a good motorcycle engine in
exactly,
there.
exactly. On a very, very lightweight body.
Mm-hmm. Chuck, thank you very much.
Lance, it was a pleasure having you. Thank you very much, and hopefully you'll enjoy your new Jaguar.
I'm sure I will. And David, thank you very much.
It was a fantastic afternoon. Thank you
It was
very
a
much
learning
for coming.
experience hanging out with you guys today. If the audience would like to know more about the collection, how do they do that?
Well, David?
Oh, it's probably best to meet us online at www.thesanDiegocollection.com. We're located at San Diego, California, 7215 El Cajon Boulevard, and you're always welcome. Come in, have a cup of coffee with us, and talk torque.
You also make the facility open or available for, you've had weddings here and corporate parties and everything.
A lot of stuff orientated to helping the different police.
Right, yeah, the charities for the police.
Right.
Well, thanks a lot, guys, and let's find out if, David, what you were telling me was true on Jaguars. Let's just see how long this one runs.
Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye, Lance.
Thanks, guys.
You take care. We like to acquire rare, unique, pristine vehicles, and this just